Morning, everyone. We will welcome to the May 14th meeting of the Boise Public Library Board of Trustees. I will now call this meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Come on. Yes. Lenny?
Here.
Pantera? Here. Wisniewski? Clemens?
Here.
4 board members present, Wisniewski absent.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have an introduction this morning.
We have one introduction. Hiding behind the column is Haley Shillitow, who is a library staff member who has recently moved into the community resource coordinator role. That is the rename of our mental health coordinator. That's the position that is a licensed social worker. So Haley has been working at the library, was doing her social work degree, passed everything that she needed to pass, and has now moved into the role full time. So we're thrilled to have her. I need you all to get a chance to meet her. And we'll also work later, probably in the next 6 months or so, to bring her before the board to talk a little bit more about the role and some of the work support she's providing to the community, to partners and to staff.
Congratulations, welcome. All right, moving on, no communications this morning. So if you would please take a look at the April 9th, 2025 minutes from the previous meeting. We just need a motion to approve the minutes unless there are any requests for revision.
I reviewed the minutes and move that we approve them as written.
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Come on. Yes. Lenny?
Yes.
Pantera? Yes. Clemens?
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved in a single motion. A trustee may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Approve the consent agenda.
Second.
A roll call, please.
Come on. Yes. Lenny?
Yes.
Pantera? Yes. Clemens?
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you so much. Moving on to reports. This morning we have Jill Johnson, treasurer from the Friends of the Boise Public Library. Hi, Jill. Good to see you.
Hi, nice to be back. It's been about 1.5 years since I've been to one of these things. So thank you for the invitation today. I got the short end of the stick because Kirsten's in Japan. So unfair. Anyway, just 3 quick things today. First of all, we're really looking forward to being part of the summer reading kickoff on Saturday. We'll be having some things to give away, and just it's always such a great event. And so thank you to everyone for putting that on and continuing to produce such a wonderful summer program for Boise. Second of all, we have a sale coming up June 6th through 8th in our new space on Fulton. It'll be a general interest sale. So if anybody is looking for some new summer reads or just wants to load up a bag of books on the cheap, please come and see us. And finally, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we have opened up weekly Saturday donation hours from 10 to 12. Previously, we were only open midday, about 3 days a week. And so we're really excited that we've recruited another crew and are now taking weekend donations as well.
Amazing. Thank you. It's been great to see all the promotions and activity going around all these regular sales. So we're super grateful for you, Jill.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next up, we have Camille Franks, the foundation chair for the Boise Public Library Foundation. Hey, Camille.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Our update for this month is that the foundation participated in this year's Idaho Gives campaign for the first time in a number of years. We were pleased with the response, which yielded a little over $2,700 during their 4-day campaign. We had 46 donors who contributed, and all except one also donated the processing fees, which was awesome. Our next meeting is on June 12th. Does anyone have any questions?
Congratulations. And thank you so much for the Idaho Gives. I know we've been looking for it amongst the board members for the last couple of years. I was really excited and thrilled to see that. So thank you so much for making that happen. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate the support.
Camille, just
I'm
Do you
back.
want to talk about the stickers and the summer reading logo?
I had it earmarked for next month, but I'm happy
Okay.
to share.
Sorry, I
Um,
ruined the surprise.
No, you're all good. You're all good. The foundation is also donating $2,000 to have summer reading stickers printed up. It will have that really cool design that's been prepared, and so that will be the giveaway this year. And we're thrilled to be a part. So thank you for the opportunity to do that too.
Thank you. I'm excited
Yeah.
to see before that beautiful print gets out there.
Yeah,
Thank you, and sorry for ruining the surprise.
all good.
I was very excited.
Okay, moving on to our director's report. Jessica.
Yeah, so I'm sure you noticed when you walked in just how attractive and sharp and colorful staff look today. It's because we are wearing our new summer reading shirts, and we want to invite all of you and members of the community Saturday from 10 to 2. We have a summer reading and learning celebration that'll be a jump with multiple partners that are interested in helping kids summer with reading and learning. There'll be rock bands and food trucks and touch a truck, and it'll be a very, very fun time. So I really want to encourage everyone to come. If you can't make it, we also will have at all of our locations on the 22nd, which is when the day summer reading officially launches. We'll also have parties at every location as well. So really excited to kick off summer reading. And we do have this great design from local artist Miguel Almeida. You might have remember him. He's one of our library card design as well. So super excited to be having that launch. I have a couple other updates I wanted to share briefly with you. First off, I want to give you an update on the open board of trustee position. The application window was in March, closed at the end of the month. April. It was in April. Closed at the end of April. We received 12 applications. Rebecca, Ron, and I reviewed them all, and I've been reaching out to a number of potential candidates and applicants for discussions before we send recommendations to the mayor for her consideration, which keeps us on track to have that confirmation in June. So in that July meeting, we will have a full board of trustees. And as this is Rebecca's last in-person meeting with us. So we're very appreciative of her, but also very sad that she's here. So we wanted to make sure she was celebrated. We have your vase with your beautiful flowers, and it wasn't just one staff card, it is an entire stack of cards from staff that are sharing how much they've appreciated your leadership and your support. A couple other things to share. We will next Tuesday, there'll be the budget workshop with council. So we're getting close to having a FY26 budget proposed to the city council. And that will also open on the proposed budget will be released to the public on June 13th. So May 20th will be the overview to council, and then June 13th will be the full budget release, and this will be obviously on our June agenda as well. I'm happy to send a link if you want to watch the council workshop. I'm happy to send a link to the board so you can tune into it as well. I had a good chance to meet with I'm sorry, let me skip that. I'll come back to it. So the facilities update, a couple things I wanted to share on that. We've made good progress in our conversations with group 4. We're going back and forth on some of the modeling and recommendations. So we could have that, we expect to be able to have that on the June or July meeting, and we may think about with the timing of a new board of trustee member what makes the most sense to do. But we'll keep that moving forward. And then also in facilities, we had some recent news that we have recently learned in with regards to our Hillcrest location, that Step Ahead Idaho is going to be leaving that space as they are winding down the current configuration of Step Ahead Idaho as a nonprofit. So their last day in the Hillcrest location will be December 31st. So and this is very new news, they have not formally made the news to, there's some steps in terms of their lease about formally notifying the city of the leading the lease, but we will be thinking about what that location and what that space might mean for library services. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the board packet, because I want to really highlight some of the great work that James Souter, our data analyst, has done. You may have noticed on page 11, he created an overview of all the updates and changes that are in this board packet with our updated library statistics. In that, he's got definitions for some of the specific statistics, how they're collected, more historical comparisons, and then I'm particularly pleased with program attendance slides that he's been able to put together. So he's continued, I think, to do some really great work in making those materials available. We now believe that we are in a place where this data is sort of steady state. These are the changes that we wanted to make. We think these will be the ones that we'll be reporting on going forward with you all. And our next step is really to ask our community engagement team to sort of try to make them in a more easily digestible format, a little bit easier to read, so you're not flipping through slide after slide after slide, to really get some of the designers to take a look at it. But we'd love if you had a chance to look at it or have any feedback.
Questions, comments, concerns, applause?
I think that
Applause.
data and slides have come along with that stuff.
Yeah, please extend our thanks to James. I know he's been working continuously on improving and finding new ways to share the data with us. And it's really great to be able to see, and we're starting to get to see a little bit more of that longitudinal data that we're really interested in. So appreciate his great work there. Okay. Moving on, we did this month have a request for consideration. This month, the title was Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. In your packet, starting on page 45, you will see the letter submitted by the patron that requested a review of this material. This instance was a bit of a unique one as compared to some of our previous requests for reconsideration. This request was brought forward by a NAPA card holder. But it does appear that this was a Boise Public Library book that was accessed through the consortium. So that's why it made its way over to us for consideration. And in reviewing the material, it appeared that the individual requesting the reconsideration was more concerned with some of the profanity and language used in the book, and was really interested mostly in reaching out to the publisher and the author to express their concerns. So with that, we have the memo from Jessica and the full review that was done by the staff on the book, including some new tables for our reference and ease of review to show whether the material meets or does not meet criteria for assuring that we would retain a material in our collection development and maintenance policy. So with that, the recommendation in the memo that we have to consider today for our vote is based on the findings that we keep the book and that the staff outreach to this individual and share the publisher and author's contact information to be able to address those concerns.
I have a question before we get into what you just sort of asked about. I was under the impression that a request for reconsideration had to come from a Boise Public Library card holder, or at least Boise resident or non-resident with property ownership in the city of Boise.
In our current policy, stay tuned for later in the agenda, in our current policy, that does not limit this.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the material was, the book that was checked out was a Boise Public Library copy. it is a book that is widely held in the consortium. But the requester used our barcode. So we know it was a copy that came from our library. And this is also, I think, an example of some of the work that our team does that would never have been visible to the board pre-Children's School Library Protection Act, where these are always coming to the board now. In that this is really, if you read the request for reconsideration, it really is somebody who is interested in more of a connection with the author and with the publisher. We would have done that as soon as we had had that interaction with a community member. And so this, again, I think is one of those where we are following the policy that was set by the board in response to the Children's School and Library Protection Act, and there are some definite unintended consequences.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I would like to give, I feel as a librarian, it's very important to give the Meridian District Library credit for, I think, a real improvement in the review, lining up the table that's on page 52, that collection, development, and maintenance policy, and the regulation, and having the real clarity of, asking staff to go through that work of making sure that analysis is done directly following policy and regulation.
Jessica, do you know if you kept track of any time that's coming to this? This is a lot. Did you speak to that? Do you have any intention of keeping track of that? I think at the very least, council would be interested in when we lobby the legislature on these types of things and really understanding the true impact that it's having on the city and the staffing challenges that we have.
Yes. This was a discussion we last month when we talked with the board about this will be a year, May marks a year of having the Children's School and Library Protection Act and our revised policy. One of the questions I got from the board was how much time are we spending on this? And we believe at a minimum we're averaging about 10 hours of staff time per request that comes in. Some of them have been higher, particularly some of the first ones where we were really trying to figure out how did this apply with unique situations. But when we look at time spent by our collections team, time spent by legal, our web team, myself as director, admin, we think it averages about 10 hours per request for consideration. It doesn't include board time. There's probably some other time that we could look at, but we are starting to do that analysis just for the recent list.
Just like filling up the table, I mean, how do you go about doing this? I mean, how familiar does staff need to get with the material to?
Sure.
Would you like to join our conversation?
Sure. So in this particular case, what we do is look at the kind of overview of the material. We try to look back at all of the reviews. I did scan through material to see what the kind of gist of it was. Sometimes it's a little bit subjective. We actually had a conversation on whether or not it could fall underneath the educational layers too. And at the time, I decided that actually it didn't seem to make more sense in some of that vein from, it's not actually taking that kind of like, it's not trying to explicitly teach you something. So there is a little bit of that where obviously there can be some wiggle room, but the overall content of the item, we are trying to kind of look at it as we're bringing content in. We don't get into a super granular level. It is a little shocking to me still after all these years that the people who do our adult nonfiction collection often remember the individual titles that they order because they are reviewing them to make sure that they're worth the money spent and that they'll meet the community need. So we do quite a lot of the review in the first place to try to make sure that it's going to meet the policy. So then when we go back for something like this, it's nice to actually have it laid out so that we can be sure, yes, we can overlook something potentially. Then we also take a look, in this particular case, we took a look at the person's concerns to see, is the profanity impeding in any way how somebody can interact with the material, and we're trying to kind of take a look at that. So does that answer your question about how we're engaging with it?
I'll just say a couple other things that Kathy and your team always do. They look at, one, is this an item that we own? And then they look at how often it's circulated as a way of understanding, is there community interest in it? And then she also pulls the critical sort of reviews, or if it was something that was award winning as well. So that's other time that she's spending.
I would just speak to my personal experience, and that with the board time not captured, I do believe there's even more, maybe even double of that, in that I know most of us obtain the book in advance when we know that it's happening, read it in full or scan it ourselves as well, and do additional work. And then usually president and vice president have some additional discussions as staff are doing the consideration. So I think the board time on top of the staff time would make it pretty significant as well.
Just getting back to where you left off before I distracted us. I thought the review and recommendation are pretty solid. I noted that this particular patron was polite and constructive and pointing out something that makes this not appropriate, appealing to all audiences. And she seemed to be, as someone indicated already, looking for a chance to feed back to the author that you're not adding anything to the book, to the work with this language, but you may be detracting for some audiences. And I really thought this was in the right spirit that was submitted. But I agree with the recommendation, and I'm ready to make a motion when we're through with discussion.
Any other comments? Okay, again, the recommendation is to keep the book in the Boise Public Library collection and to share publisher and author contact information back to the patron.
I move that the board adopt the library director's written response and a recommendation decision as its own.
Second.
Can we get a roll call?
Paul? Yes. Honey?
Yes.
Kendra? Yes. Lemons?
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to old business, policy review. We'll start with the first of two sections that we'll be reviewing at this meeting. The first one is section 4.07 on page 55, the confidentiality of records. There, Kelly Chase.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, this is carrying the thread of request for reconsideration. And this is the very last section of 4.0, which was pretty large. We saved this to the end because it does tie into what Kathy will be talking about. We're recommending one minor tweak in the second paragraph to say that pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74-108, circulation records and other records created by the library that identify a user's general reading history are confidential in nature. And the reason why we're making that tweak is because with our our request for reconsideration, those documents that are submitted by the public are public records. So we wanted to clarify that items that we're creating, those stay confidential. Other pieces that come in related to our requests are public record, and they may indicate the person's name and the title that they read. Does anyone have any questions?
Very clear. Small change.
I think it makes sense, and I appreciate that it reinforces having the names available as people submit them, because that is an important part of our process, making that transparent. Excellent. With that, yeah, I need a motion to approve changes as written.
I move to approve policy 4.07 as revised.
Roll call?
Oh, yes. Lenny?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Lemons?
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to the next section, section 502, reconsideration of materials. Kathy Sutler's going to walk us through this one.
So we do have a couple of recommendations in this one. To the kind of overall policy of collection involvement, we're not recommending any changes there, but we are recommending a change in the nature and quality of materials regulation, which is 5.01C. That we're going to take a little bit of a different tangent away from just request for reconsiderations for a moment. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence materials. And we've been kind of going back and forth and grappling with whether or not to add this point to the nature and quality of materials, because generally quality of a material is one of the things that we try to gauge. What we're finding with artificial intelligence is they're really good at making it look like it's a vetted item. And sometimes they even they'll have an author page that's made up, but it looks like a legitimate author page. They'll have some items that they get like 5-star reviews on the title. The titles seem fairly interesting. Jessica actually brought one that we got in as a request for reconsideration, and it seemed like it could be
As a purchase request, yes.
yeah, as a request for purchase. Sorry. And so we purchased it thinking that it looked like a title that could be worthwhile. And that led us down a little bit of the path of trying to figure out how would we be able to distinguish items that are actually pretty much just generated by AI and don't have much human involvement with them. And this is a perfect example of that. It looks okay from the outside. It looks it looks like a little homegrown, but there's nothing that would 100% trigger you to think, oh, this one doesn't have good quality. But once you start to read it, the quality is just terrible. There's no logic to it. It doesn't really actually do the thing that it's supposed to. And we've been working with other libraries around the country to try to figure out how they're approaching it, how many they're seeing. It's really hard to figure out when we're trying to fill requests for people. It's hard to figure out whether or not these things are legitimate. And some of the AI generated content has actually it mimics other really well-known and popular series. So if we're not thoughtful about whether it's AI content specifically, it can be hard to take that thought process and then decide that we're not actually going to purchase it. So that's why we would like to add this bullet point to it's one of the many things that we're considering for the general criteria of looking at an item. And it's materials created primarily by artificial intelligence without clear human involvement will not be added to the collection due to their lack of coherence, factual accuracy, and quality. At some point, if AI does to make it better quality, then we could remove that point because it wouldn't be one that we would be specifically looking at and considering.
I have a concern that this proposed addition is not sufficiently forward-looking. I think AI is moving extremely fast and it's going to accelerate at the pace that it's moving. And I can envision user manuals, textbooks, things like that coming up to speed very, very quickly. And the things that you've highlighted in this proposed change are sort of covered in other bullets: subject and style for intended audience, reputation or significance of author, skill and competence and purpose of author. The work you described could have been excluded on the basis of any one of those three without calling it out. I think this will look like old language in a year or two when the capabilities of artificial intelligence for certain things really rises to the top.
I agree. And I think that that's why we went back and forth on whether or not to add it. I do think at times it's helpful when we're referring people to the criteria that we use when we're looking at whether or not to add. We have self-published materials as one of the criteria. That is also one in nonfiction because they're not vetted as well. They don't go through a rigorous process. It's hard to do any fact checking. And we call out self-published materials specifically, even though over time, self-published materials might also change. In the years since we've seen self-publishing, that hasn't been the case yet. So I do see your point, and I think that at any time, if we get to the point where AI materials or self-published materials are generally of a higher quality, then I think we revisit this and pull it out and speak to the fact that actually now we're looking at a different environment.
I do think this will be obviously an ongoing conversation, not just societally, but specific to libraries and education and other things, because I think it is difficult to know how to identify. As you spoke to this one, was I had a chance to flip through that one, and it's pretty clear once you get your hands on it, but others we don't know. And so I would just ask for future, as I am certain the American Library Association and others will continue to grapple with this on a national level as well. And best practices will slowly, or at least discussed practices, will start to emerge about how best to handle materials with AI, whether that's considering labeling them if we do identify that there are materials appropriate for collection, but do we need to signal that to the public? You know, things like that, questions like that, points of discussion around how do we engage with and verify AI? I would love to see that conversation continue to be brought back to the board so that we can stay up to date on how other libraries and other people in the profession are considering this as well, because I'm certain we're not the only ones.
And it has been interesting. So in, I think June, July, sometime in that time frame, one of our librarians has given an interview with, I think it's Library Journal, and they're going to be publishing an article on AI, and they were very interested on how we're approaching it and whether or not we are putting something in the policy and what that looks like and what the conversation is around it, because so many libraries are talking about it and there's not a clear directive at the time. Any other thoughts or questions or comments on that?
I agree that it's, in my personal opinion, I think I agree that, and I had the same thought as you, Brian, that this might be outdated rather quickly. However, I'm also reminded that we review this policy every year. And so we'll have the opportunity next May if things are looking quite different. And the least thing that intrigues me about this is the signals that we're having the conversation, that we're thoughtfully considering that. So I think from that lens point, if the staff is recommending it, then I'm inclined to support it at this time, knowing that we can review and revise later.
I think that's a really important point. And Kathy and I talked about this, even with the clarity in this list of criteria, a book like that may make it through. It may be something that we end up purchasing again because of us wanting to make sure that we are being responsive to the public if the public is making a request for a material being added to the collection. But I do like the marker of, okay, this is the direction that Kathy provides her team in when they're adding materials. And so keeping that quality and adding that, okay, now we need to actually start looking at some of these materials in a different way, knowing that there is this emerging technology and this, and it is in the books that are published and available. So I do think that, to me, was the piece that was convincing in why, yeah, we should, because this is the direction that we're providing to staff and having them make sure, like, okay, let's add this to the things that we're looking at. That discipline will serve us well as we continue going.
Next section.
Okay, so the next section is actually, we are asking to make a change to policy 5.02, which is reconsideration of materials. What we found within the last year and the ones that we've seen come through is originally we had talked about making one form so that it was less confusing. And what we think actually is that my request to have it be one form has made it actually more confusing. So, we think that pulling it out and actually making it two separate forms would make it easier for people to understand which form to fill out and what they're actually trying to achieve with their request for reconsideration or a written notice and complaint alleging material harm to minors. So we are trying to make sure that it's a little bit more clear on who would fill out which form and what they're trying to do with that request. So that's the gist of asking for it. And then also, Brian, to your point that yes, we did used to have where it was a Boise resident or non-resident who owns property within the city limits. So we have asked to put that back in. When we are looking at requests for reconsideration of materials, we do think it's really important that it is somebody within the community who is paying in taxes for the library, that their voice is the one that we're really looking to hear. And so we think that that's worthwhile to put that back in, and then also making it clear that with the written notice, that would be anyone who comes in and interacts with our material that is a minor or the parent or guardian of an impacted minor. So that would not need to be a Boise resident. So we can, having two forms makes it so that we can more kind of clearly call that out, still make sure that we're following what the law states, and also make it easier for when people are filling out the form, which one they should do and which pieces of it they should do. What we've seen is that even on the one, like this one, where it was clear she wasn't interested in having it be a written notice, she still filled out some of the bits of the written notice. So I think there's just that confusion on what these additional questions are. There was a piece that I overlooked when we submitted the draft. So on that, in the policy, I think it's on page 68 of the board packet. There's a point two under procedure for submitting a request for reconsideration of materials or written notice, and it does have the bullet point about a request for reconsideration can be submitted by a City of Boise resident or by a non-resident who owns property within the City of Boise, and it has a strike through in it. That was one of the drafts, and so I didn't catch that had been put in as a strike through when we moved it up to a different portion of the policy. Then we tried to call out clearly that there would be two forms, one for the request for reconsideration of materials and a different one for a written notice of complaint alleging material harmful to minors, hereafter referred to as written notice.
When I was reading through this, it occurred to me, I noticed the change and inclusion of who may participate in this. Does it make sense to formally state that if they do not qualify under 5 or 6, 6 being completion, that we won't review their submission? Personally, I don't feel we should be taking time and resource to review submissions from people outside of Boise, don't have the interests and the taxes and the spirit of the community at heart. And I'd like to call out that we won't review things that don't qualify, don't meet the criteria of our policy.
Ryan, can you clarify what page you're on?
68, and the top of the page is that's the definition section A, and it's subsection V5, and that's where the Boise residents or property owner in Boise is called out. It doesn't say card holder. It says that it's someone who's paying to support the library. And the next section, 6, highlights that it needs to be completed and submitted about 5 lines down in order to be written notice. So, I was thinking we would say something like, at a minimum, the submitted form must contain sufficient information to confirm Boise residency or non-residency with property ownership, the date submitted, and some description of the reason the complainant considers the material to be harmful to minors or obscene. I note that the policy does not say they have to use the forms that we've established. They can just write a letter or something that approximates the form. So I don't think it makes sense that they have to fill out every blank on our form, since we've given them the ability to use an alternative form. But I do think saying that a minimum set of points must be met in order to qualify for review under our policy. Is that clear?
Is that open for potential legal repercussion though? Because I know that the law, at least regarding the materials harmful to minors, we do have an obligation to respond if that is the pathway. With the request for reconsideration, I'm not so sure, but legally, where are we bound to have to respond?
Thanks for the question. So if you look in section C, so on page 69, the second paragraph, it discusses how the discretion is to the board president to bring it forward, because this is implementing a law that is sort of blunt and not well refined to how library boards operate. So we are intending to comply with the law and also providing discretion to the board president about which ones to bring forward. And then there is no, so we have our legal requirements, and this was the avenue that we were trying to thread that needle between legal compliance and if we were to get inundated with requests. Because when we drafted this, we didn't know what it was going to look like or how many requests we would get or what tools we would need to be able to decide which requests are brought to the board. So that is sort of baked into the policy as written, that discretion to the board president. And I think to date, given the number that we've had so far, and it's been a number that we've been able to bring each one to the board for visibility and transparency. That's why they all have been coming to the board. And that transparency piece is also part of the policy of letting the public know what's being requested and what the analysis and response is. So your concerns, I think, are contemplated overall within the policy. So you're saying that it's an exception deciding to review a request for consideration from someone who doesn't meet the criteria that are established in the policy. We have the ability to make an exception. So as I understand it, so the request for reconsideration and the written notice are slightly different. The request for reconsideration is somebody who's not seeking to use it as the first step in a lawsuit. The written notice is. So the written reconsideration piece that Kathy has been talking about, and limiting that to Boise residents and card holders, that's because it's based on a policy decision that folks in Boise should have the ability to request something from their library and it be dealt with by the library. And we're not required to allow other folks from outside the community to make those requests. However, the written notice piece is baked into the law, and the law says any person can file a written notice, and just the filing of the written notice sort of triggers the legal path forward for them. So therefore, there's a distinction made that the written notice is available to any person in compliance with the law.
We use the example we just went over though, and I'm wondering I'm just asking if we're closing a pathway there where we had a card holder from another library system, not a Boise Public Library card holder, who likely had they been given the opportunity just to do the request for reconsideration process without the harmful to minor piece, might have used that process based on what I'm gathering from the request itself. That would not be allowable. They would still have to use the harmful to minors piece, even though that wasn't the intent, or now they don't have a pathway to raise that concern with us. Yes, but maybe that's correct, because that person should have gone to their own library system,
Correct.
even though it was our.
Yes, that's how we've operated in the past.
Okay.
Yes, that when you're part of the consortium and that other libraries make different decisions on what they acquire, and when you bring the material over, you are looking at something that was coming from a different collection development policy. So it's fairly standard. When I was looking through what the rest of the consortium libraries are doing currently, at least half of them do have the city of the city of wherever, and then non-resident owns property for a request for reconsideration. I think before the law went into effect, most of us did. Because we recognize that as a consortium, it is a challenge. Like, our collection development policies are not going to meet the standards of maybe a more conservative community, for example. And so when we bring our materials in, you're making that choice. Your library has decided to be a part of a consortium with a larger library system that has a wider breadth of depth collection. So we're looking at it like we buy materials for this collection to meet the needs of our community. We're not going to narrow the scope of the things that we are purchasing in order to meet the needs of smaller, more conservative communities, for example. So when we're looking at our focus, we are not trying to tailor it to different individual library systems. And so if they have concerns, they can certainly talk to their local library about how to maybe not get materials from Boise, or how they can interact with somebody and learn more about the material before they bring it over. So I think that there's a lot of ways in place that we have staff that are really excited to help people find materials that will be right for them. And in the past, I think that goes back to what Jessica was saying, that we've had several of these types of examples where somebody's come into the building and didn't like something that they saw and used while they were in the building. They weren't our community members. And so from that point of view, we wouldn't look at it as a request for reconsideration if they just wanted to have us take it out of the collection. Now, if it's harmful, if they consider it harmful to minors and they're alleging it in a written notice, they could come into our location and say, this is harmful to minors. And then we would definitely still put it through the process like the law dictates. I don't know if that's helpful.
It did, yes, thank you.
And back on written notice, using the explanation you just provided, somebody from North Idaho could go through the library's catalog and find a title that matches one on their list for some reason and send a minimal written notice without naming themselves, without dating the written notice, without providing much information of value at all in the process, and we're obligated to review that.
Well, I wouldn't say that, the law provides them a cause of action following the board not removing the material within 60 days of the written notice.
Okay. Personally, I kind of like that. Then we get to go test this law in court if it proceeds down that path. But basically, the scenario I described is possible.
It is contemplated within the law, yes.
So I'm reminding everybody that we had a submission which would qualify as written notice, and no name was provided, signature was illegible, it's illegible, it was dripping with hostility, was not constructive in any sense whatsoever, and we needed to go through and review that because it qualified as written notice.
I think I don't know. I think these changes look good. I like making the distinction between the written notice under the law where a minor's involved versus our other policy. I think it's pretty clearly written. I understand your concerns, Brian, but I think, that's something that staff looks at when they're doing the evaluation and that we look at when we're reviewing it, and continue to point out that perhaps this law is not resulting in an efficient thing that's solving a problem. But to me, it makes sense to still look at it and continue that transparency. So I'm supportive of these changes.
I am as well, and I think we'll lean heavily on staff who are interacting with the individuals to understand the difference between these two. But I like that there's two pathways to help people clearly articulate who may want to bring forth an issue, but may not necessarily be looking to, go into a legal conversation over the harmful to minors. So I like that there's a difference, but I do think it even took me a minute to remember the difference between the two. So I think some good education and clarity online and with the personal interactions with folks submitting these as much as possible will be helpful to help people choose the right pathway for their intentions of this.
I do think it will continue to be confusing. Sure. It is, we are due, it was really, I think when Kathy and I sat down, it was like, wow, it has been a year and we have 5 examples and we are thinking about what are some of the refinement we can do. We hope it does provide that clarity, but I anticipate it will continue to be confusing and will continue to come before the board. And I think particularly the discussions that I've had with board leadership, they've absolutely, particularly in this first year, brought everything forward, really with that idea of being completely transparent with the public of what's being submitted, what are staff looking at, what analysis that we need to do to understand, or to go back to the earlier conversation, we are constantly trying to figure out how to spend the right amount of time on this. Knowing that we do have some obligations under the law that we need to make sure that we are addressing, but also really trying to come up with a template that is as quickly as possible, particularly for Kathy and her staff's time. There are better things for them to be doing. So we're hoping that we're hoping that this continues to refine it, but really do anticipate we'll have another year of learning on this and it will continue to be confusing.
One last question. So the website where we have them posted, will there be a distinction on the website between whether it was the written complaint or just a request for reconsideration? Or are you just gonna put them in the same? Just curious because I'm thinking back, I appreciate this in part because I think most of these requests were not even children's books that were accessed by minors. So
that's correct.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Nikki, and I do think that potentially we could have them all listed but one of the things like the bit on the top that pulls out, because it would be clear which one they were doing in theory by the form that they fill out in the form, so then we could more easily kind of put them into a category, on the top.
Good with either way, just whatever. Ask the question.
I would almost make, again, take it or leave it. It's my last time in here in person. For me, it's really helpful as a member of the public to have like an infographic with a decision tree, almost like a if then. Do you want to do this? And you are these, or this, and you are this. Which form do I use? Something simple and graphic on the website and that you can use as an educational tool so that people can clearly decide which one, again, based on their intention. I think that's what it's all going to come down to is what are you intending to do with this? And do you meet the criteria for written notice versus request for reconsideration? But I always like a graphic. It helps.
I think that's a great idea. Because I think that would have absolutely helped the person who earlier.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do?
What are you trying to do?
That being said, Kathy, did we get all the way through the recommendations? Yes. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve section 502 with the staff recommended provisions? You know what I mean?
I move to approve policy 5.02 with the recommended changes.
All right, roll call.
Yes. Lenny?
Yes.
Antero? Yes. Lemons? Yes. All in favor, motion carries.
It was a very helpful discussion. Thank y'all for taking the time. Okay, with that, next month, the trustee to review payment vouchers is Nikki. Good to go? Yeah. Great. And the next meeting date will be Wednesday, June 11th. Do we have any anticipated absences that we know of now? I will be on, but I will be on your screen. Okay, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I mean, we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I'm staring at me.